Oh boy, Resident Evil 2. Man, what a game. Often considered one of the best horror games of all time. Only really competing with Age and, Resident Evil 4? Huh. Lightning really can strike twice. Anyway, the original Resident Evil 2 was huge. I may not have heard much about this series when the first game debuted, but oh boy, the second game was everywhere. Well, in gaming magazines anyway. I looked through concept art from the original take on the second game, and really I recognized all of it. The only thing I didn't actually see is Mr. X, a T-00 Tyrant that is in the original game, but I never heard wind of him at all. Given I wasn't all that interested to begin with. The liquors were interesting, but I wasn't much for horror games back then due to my distaste of horror movies. I liked the design of the monsters though. They're terrifying, but fascinating all at the same time. I had the same thing about spiders, for better or worse. Oh boy. I love spiders and the way they work and they move around, and it's fascinating. But at the same time, I have acute arachnophobia, so whoops. Don't get me wrong. I have handled on my arachnophobia. I've played many games like Twilight Princess, Skyrim, and even the first Resident Evil. However, Resident Evil just makes me tense in general, so I take way longer to play than I intend to, and that's probably not great. Part of that is just the fact that I've played the remakes instead of the original games. I should probably have played the original games first, bootlegged them or something to that effect, because this game kind of kicked my ass a bit. Yeah, about that remake. Despite selling like crazy and being on a menagerie of different consoles, Resident Evil 2 just kind of suddenly stopped showing up on newer hardware. Either Capcom felt the game was just too old, maybe there was a contract issue, or maybe they didn't know what version to re-release. Either way, it pretty much vanished. Outside of the PlayStation 3 emulation anyway. That console had a lot of classic PlayStation 1 games on it. Regardless, our PlayStation 3 is broken, so I'm stuck with the remake. Towards the later half of the PlayStation 4 lifecycle, a little over 4 years ago, Capcom released a remake of Resident Evil 2, which is fine. The original has aged a lot, being on one of the first 3D consoles after all, so it just makes sense that a remake would eventually happen. And this remake was released on a lot of different consoles, but heavily advertised with the PlayStation 4. Now that that's the easiest way to actually officially play Resident Evil 2, I figured I'd give that a go. However, I'm not great at Resident Evil games yet. This was a freaking mistake. Resident Evil 2, the remake version, is considered the hardest game in the series by a decent amount of the internet. This was kind of stupid for me to not actually notice this. I probably should have done some research. Regardless, I did eventually beat this one, at least one of the two campaigns, and learned the story of the other one, so let's do this. Let's take on the G-Virus! So when going over the plot, both campaigns share a similar plot line at first, but then both seem to kind of deviate towards the end. You either play as Leon or Claire for this adventure. Claire is naturally a Redfield and the younger sister of Chris Redfield. She's in Racoon City looking for him. This plot is quickly dropped if you're wondering. Leon is a rookie cop looking to start his first day on the job with Racoon City Police Department. Yeah, that's an interesting first day, isn't it? The two meet at a gas station with zombies. I'm sure this shocks absolutely no one. They end up driving to the city, which has even more zombies, and thanks to a tanker explosion, the two end up split up. One of the characters meets an injured cop named Marvin. He helps the played character collect medallions and escape to the parking garage of the police precinct. You're probably wondering which character that would be, but it doesn't really matter because both end up doing this. Before that happens though, a hulking mutant of some type attacks the player character and is somewhat defeated. This is where the story actually starts to split off. Leon meets Ada Wong, an informant. Though the informant has a key card out of the garage, he's unfortunately killed by Mr. X. Claire meets Sherry Birkin, a young girl who's looking for her mother in this horrible place. But Sherry is quickly kidnapped by the police captain, Brian Irons. Such a weird name to say, I don't know why. Both characters have to dodge Mr. X back into the police station while they make their way to the clock tower and eventually escape the police station for good. Leon heads through a gun shop and Claire heads for the orphanage to find the crazed Irons killed by something bursting out of his chest. Good. Look, he was a guy who liked taxidermy way too damn much. He was sexual about it and probably murdered some poor girl. Besides, he was threatening Sherry. Claire meets up with Sherry and then runs for her life when the hulking mutant shows back up. They both run, and after a fall into the sewers, they meet Sherry's mother. Oh, and Mr. X is seemingly killed by the mutant in question too, showing how strong that damn thing actually is. Meanwhile, this is where I don't really have footage of Leon's story. He's helping Ada collect evidence against Umbrella, going after a female scientist, but it turns out Ada wasn't working for the FBI at all. Oops. Anyway, Sherry is clearly sick, and Claire needs to find her, which her less than helpful mother, Annette Birkin, is kind of around. She's the one who Ada and Leon are looking for, in case you're wondering. Annette seems more concerned about her husband, William Birkin, who I like to call Bill. He would be that big-ass hulking monster who messed up Mr. X, in case you're wondering. While trying to save Sherry, we basically get the entire story. Bill Birkin had a dispute with Umbrella higher-ups and tried to steal his new virus. The G-Virus, a stronger bioweapon maker than the T-Virus, was basically his true child. And of course he tried to steal it despite it technically being Umbrella's property. Should always read that fine print when working as a scientist. The company will always own your inventions. That's why they're funding your bill, Bill. Regardless, Bill Birkin tried taking off and was violently gunned down. However, he injected his pride and joy, the G-Virus, into himself while he was still alive. This created that hulking monster you fought a few times. The G-Virus will take over dead matter too, but when it infects someone alive, it creates a problem. That hulking problem is now near unkillable, and it wants to breed with everything, hence the chest burster from Chief Irons from earlier. However, the monster in question can only truly breed with somebody closely genetically matching himself. That would be his own daughter, who currently has a bad eye infection. Eventually, Claire manages to cure Sherry and the two start up a train as Annette unfortunately meets her untimely demise thanks to Mr. Birkin. Leon learns some of this as well and does deal with the G-Virus as well as Ada, but ends up fighting Mr. X while Claire faces off with William Birkin one last time. After killing Bill, she starts up this underground train with Leon managing to join them as the train takes off. Claire, Sherry, and Leon manage to escape Racoon City. Oh, and the lab explodes. Okay, so there's a few things to talk about. Leon's story is slightly less involved, making my opinion Claire the better story. Both are great stories given, and both together make an interesting take learning about things, but there is one small issue with Claire's story I have to address. It's a small one, but it would be her connection to Chris. She's there looking for him, and while I know surviving Racoon City is a bit more important, where the hell is he? Marvin, the cop, tells Claire that he thinks Chris is in a European vacation, but Claire finds the letter supposedly from her brother, and it's obvious the letter wasn't written by Chris. Of course, this has Umbrella written all over it, and is probably a follow-up to the ending of the first game in which Jill escapes without Chris in tow. The issue is that we don't actually get any confirmation that Chris is alive. The mansion from the first game did blow up after all. Now, I'm somewhat aware of Code Veronica, and I know Chris is like 5, 6, parts of 8. He's in these games. But to someone who doesn't know this, that would be kind of torturous not knowing. Again, it's implied that Umbrella may have just had him captive, but dang. Regardless of the nitpick, I think the writing is indeed amazing in this game. And at least in the remake, anyway. Now, let's talk visually. This remake looks amazing. The zombies looks extra gooey when they're blown up, and I tinge up every time I see that the flashlight is needed to see in the level. This game is full of narrow rooms and hallways, making zombie fights tense and harder to just ignore while trying to survive. The part where Sherry is running from the police chief is absolutely skin-crawling due to the corpse he's working on taxidermying and the monsters. Mr. X is awesome, and his presence is felt through the entire police office. Lickers look grotesque and deadly, and the Ivy zombies near the end are amazingly designed. William Birkin looks fantastic, as you can kind of recognize him as originally a human. The creatures in the sewers can hide in the water, making them tense too. The zombies have amazing designs, enough variety to almost not notice how many models there actually are. This is great! Going back to Mr. X for a moment, the sound cues are amazing too. If you listen, you know when a licker or a zombie happens to be nearby. As stated, Mr. X can also be heard nearly everywhere in the police station, as he does not pick up his feet much at all when he's walking. He must weigh a ton too. The music, however, is something I really didn't get to hear much of. Not that it's a bad soundtrack, I gave it a listen afterwards after all. However, it is on the quieter side, more situational and ambient compared to other video game soundtracks. But overall, I'd still say it worked. You want to hear the zombies more than anything, right? As well as maybe the decent voice work in the game. All the characters have excellent actors behind them. They do great lines, and honestly, I think the voice works really well around here. Well, I'm not too sure. I didn't look any of them up, but they did amazing work here, so that's all that matters, right? Either way, this game looks and sounds amazing. So, to my knowledge, both Leon and Claire kind of play the same. You can play as Ada at some point, who has spy gear, and Sherry, who crouches and hides. But Leon and Claire are going to be the ones you play the most. Both of them have typical item slots. You use these to navigate guns and puzzle options to find solutions to issues while you survive. Your item space is limited, but you can leave items in large item boxes when space is an issue. However, with this, you'll have to pick and choose what you need to bring. Guns are obviously super important because, well, there's a ton of monsters out in the area. Not just zombies, but bigger baddies as well. With guns, you'll need to address reload time, ammo count, ability to craft ammo with gunpowder found, and of course how powerful the gun actually is. Of course, avoiding is sometimes an option, but Claire and Leon are somewhat slow, which makes avoiding sometimes a bit difficult. Also, don't assume both characters will run into the same monsters in the same area. Oh boy, I was out of ammo at this particular point near the parking garage, and I thought, hey, I can sneak past some lickers, no problem. But unfortunately, that only works with Claire. See, I was playing as Leon, and in Leon's story, this area doesn't have lickers. It has zombie dogs. Shockingly, I didn't die, though I wonder if the AI doesn't ease up in critical moments. Regardless, the main difference between Leon and Claire are the weapon types they come across, but the shotgun was still very useful as Leon. Claire, however, did get a grenade launcher, so there are some differences for sure. But heavy weapon is still useful against the same enemies. It's just one fires bullets and one fires, well, fire, which is infinitely more useful in certain cases. I wonder if Claire was supposed to be the easier mode. Oh well. If you think weapon management is your only issue, it isn't. You also have puzzles to solve. I didn't find any of them taxing per se, but you'll need to make sure you have plenty of room for each item. At least until you get to a safe box anyway. Or, upgrade your inventory pouches, but we'll talk about that later. You will need to examine boxes and combine items to get what you need done. The Remake does have a nifty little feature that checkmarks items that you can throw away though. Unlock all the doors involving a specific key? Throw that key away. And yes, keys take up item slots. There are keys only Leon gets and some only Claire get though, so don't freak out if you can't unlock every single thing. Honestly, puzzle solving and blasting zombies and monsters aren't too awfully bad overall. But what happens when a zombie or monster gets up close? Well, you can carry knives, grenades, and flash grenades to help even those odds. Knives are a nice way to save on ammo when you've knocked a monster down, or when it gets up close and you just want to, get it off you before it takes too much damage. Grenades and flash grenades are a bit more potent overall, but I did try and save those when I could, and I ended up saving them too much and not really using them. Oops, my bad. Alright, let's hash out something I mentioned earlier. This is considered, at base normal difficulty, to be the hardest Resident Evil game in a lot of lists. Like almost always. I got chewed out on what is the normal mode of the game. I managed to run past a lot of dogs with little ammo and health, as you guys could clearly see. I constantly ran out of ammo and knives. Like, zombies take a lot of abuse in this game, and oftentimes you don't really have enough ammo to take them all out. You can stun them, but even then that's kind of difficult. These zombies are resilient as all hell, and let's not talk about the rest of the monsters. No, I have to talk about it. Lickers are devastating in every way possible. I ran out of ammo so often because of these damn things. If they catch you, they will attack you, and they are aggressive, and they damage a lot, and man, they're hard to avoid. They can't see you, which is nice, but damn. Eventually, I just bumped over to Claire's story and on easy mode, thinking that, if normal mode felt like hard mode, easy mode would probably feel more like a normal mode. Nope, easy mode felt like an easy mode. The difficulty jump between the easy and the normal difficulties in this game is almost degrading. Nothing came close to what I was dealing with in the normal mode of the game. Not only are monsters way easier to take down, but ammo was just much more abundant. Given, apparently Claire is faster than Leon, so maybe that helped a little bit. But easy mode should prepare you for the harder modes, and this isn't exactly what happened. Instead, it just gave me an easier way to experience the story and get used to the map. I don't like this, but I suppose it's at least an option. Speaking of the map, the police station is thankfully not as large as the mansion from the first game. You will still spend a lot of time in here, though. The first time, you have options to board windows to make certain hallways way easier to experience and roam, as zombies will burst through some of the windows. Yeah, the zombies can actually get through the windows, and it makes the experience way more tense and oftentimes more difficult than because you could just end up with more zombies than you probably should. You have to be quick and strategic, as you, of course, have limited boards to work with. You definitely want to board up windows that you visit often, though. You will eventually deal with lickers in the police office, too, while you're trying to escape. They can't see you, but their hearing is pretty good, as mentioned earlier. Some, however, will just straight up ambush you while you're just, trying to do something, while some are just kind of hanging around. Don't try to fight them all unless you really need a hallway cleared. Lickers, when pissed, are aggressive, fast, and dangerous. However, fire grenades work really well against them, so, when you're playing as Claire, let them burn. Leaving the police office, you're quickly pushed into going back to the office for a keycard, and will need to head back up to the clock tower. This is where Mr. X, a stealth tyrant, comes in to find you. He's big and can be heard if he's nearby, even if he isn't in the same room as you. Also, don't shoot his hat off like I did. He'll get pissed. He is indestructible until damaged by William Birkin and killed at the end of Leon's story. William comes in ever so often as a boss fight as well. You'll have to fight him twice in Leon's story and 3 whole times in Claire's story, having him act as the final boss to fight her. Eventually, you leave the police office and get into the sewers. I don't know about Leon here, but Claire runs into some pretty big monsters. She has a running sequence with William Birkin, and I guess Leon has a running sequence very similar with a crocodile. These things are big, by the way, these monsters here. But their weakness is pretty obvious once you do enough damage to expose it. Aim for the big ol' eye. The sewers are a bit overly large, but at least Mr. X isn't stomping around, and the monsters here can be killed with enough ammo. Eventually, you'll make your way to the Umbrella's underground laboratory. This place has a lot of zombies and Ivy zombies. Oh boy! Ivy zombies are plant-based zombies that can't be killed unless you have fire on you. Since ammo is limited, you may need to pick and choose which ones to kill. You can still take them down by blasting the yellow sacks on them, but they'll eventually regenerate and get up with enough time passing. I guess the Ivy zombies are new to the remake, and the original had more plant-based monsters. Maybe someday I'll go check it out. Either way, the levels are perfectly fine. The first two are about escaping the police station, but the sewers and the lab are a bit simpler. I don't think this game is small, though. All these areas are pretty expansive, all things considered. It's just the police station is more open-ended area compared to the rest of them. But that doesn't mean the rest of them aren't slightly open-ended in their own way. This does make the two final areas easier to figure out, though, but overall the levels and William Birkin boss fights are perfectly fine and work well to stress you the hell out. This is a horror game after all. So there's actually quite a few secrets that you can unlock in this game that I didn't necessarily get because I'm not exactly great at the game. Although I found out you can buy them as DLC, I also didn't do that. Perhaps you'll fare better. There are alternate scenarios you can play and a few that you can unlock. The best one is easily Tofu Survivor. You play as a large block of tofu. This is hilarious and shows that the developers are really looking out for you to have fun at the very least. Bonus fact, it's also unlockable in the original too. There's a few bonus scenarios right from the start though too. Some of these involve characters that you meet as either Leon or Claire, and some of these are just bonuses. Outside of these, you can also unlock some costumes for beating the game in various ways, and find some sweet gear in the game itself. Look at this overly large taser I found for Claire. This thing is cool, but I never really did get enough time to properly utilize it. You can also find item pouches. Yeah, you can actually find secret locations, like, some safe combinations or anything like that, with item pouches to increase your actual inventory, which is, oh man, so useful. You'd be surprised how much that actually does for you in the game. Overall, while I didn't do a lot of this stuff, there is plenty to experience outside of... Wait a minute, am I unlocking artwork? Oh yeah, you can unlock artwork in the game models to look at. That's awesome. You can have an in-game checklist, and I think a collectible in the game itself will help you out with this too. There are these raccoon dolls that I've been finding and shooting every so often. I wonder if those are unlocking things. It's nice to have a secret collectible in the game. So, you find it, you get stuff for it. This game basically does it all, doesn't it? I think it's safe to say that this game is basically a masterpiece. The only real issue I have is that normal mode feels like hard mode. That's it. Okay, and a bit of nitpicking with Chris's place in all of this. Still, those are minor complaints, and ones that I don't really think hurt your overall enjoyment of the game. Difficulty is always subjective, and part of my issue is not really understanding when zombies were dead in the first place, as well as not utilizing other items and not really knowing the layout in a harder, somewhat difficulty. It isn't the game's fault that, I didn't know where to go, that I didn't know how to deal with zombies right offhand. Since I'm not used to playing Resident Evil games, I probably should have started out with the easier difficulty anyway. It isn't that the game was broken, I just didn't really know how to get everything I could out of the supplies. So I suppose easy mode did at least help me with that for the most part. As for Claire never really getting anything about Chris, that really doesn't hurt the overall story all that much either. It really was just a reason for her to be in Racoon City at the end of the day. It is heavily implied he's under Umbrella's care, and even if you weren't aware of Code Veronica at the time, so even then, it's a nitpick, it really is. Look, the game isn't perfect, but what is here is easily a masterpiece. When my biggest complaints are minor issues at best, and possibly not even issues for most people, well, sorry, but that's a 10 out of 10 in my book. This may be incredibly challenging for newcomers, but I do recommend this game overall. If you're into horror survival games, that is. Obviously, if we're not into gruesome body horror or even survival games that stress you out, then this probably isn't for you. But if you are into some of these concepts, you can't go wrong here. But I do recommend getting in some practice with easy mode if you're a newcomer, at least until you are very used to the mechanics and layout of the map, and then you could try normal or harder difficulties. This game will beat you down if you're not prepared. However, with an easy mode that is actually an easy mode, I don't think it should be shied away from newcomers. Just beware of the difficulty spike if you, continue on to some of the harder difficulties. The one between easy and normal mode? Yeah, that's a hell of a spike. Anyway, that's all the time I have to talk about Resident Evil 2 for now. Eventually, I may try out the older games one of these days. I also want to play the remake of Resident Evil 3 for sure. I'll probably do that before moving on to Resident Evil 0 and Code Veronica for sure. However, I may not get to do that before the season ends. I also still have yet to be able to focus on Uncharted as well, but the next project I want to work on is actually River City Girls 2. I reviewed the original some time ago, one of my first reviews with a new format. But until then, like, subscribe, comment, and watch more content if you wish. These really do help my channel out. I appreciate you guys, leaving likes and watching the video. I did review the remake of the first Resident Evil game already, after all, and you can go check it out in some of my playlists. Till next time, my minions, take care.